I moved into a quiet suburban neighborhood with a nice cozy house. The backyard was my favorite part. Fenced in, a nice patio, and plenty of space. Just a few days after moving in, I met my next-door neighbor, Karen. She seemed pleasant at first, and introduced herself as the head of the local HOA. I politely greeted her and thought that would be the end of it. But over the next few weeks, she would show up randomly, offering unsolicited advice about lawn care, trash bins, and parking. She never outright demanded anything, but it was clear she expected me to follow her lead. I brushed it off, assuming she was just overly enthusiastic about her role. One day, about a month after I moved in, Karen knocked on my door. She smiled sweetly and said she wanted to talk to me about something exciting. Her daughter was getting married, and she wanted to host the wedding in my backyard. I was stunned. She explained her yard was too small, and since mine was larger and prettier, it would be perfect for the ceremony and reception. I thought she was joking, but she wasn't. I told her I was flattered but uncomfortable with the idea. I didn't know her that well, and having dozens of strangers trampling through my yard didn't appeal to me. Karen immediately changed her tone, saying it was just one day, and that she assumed I'd be happy to contribute to the community. I reiterated my answer, no. She left, clearly irritated. I figured that was the end of it. But a few days later, I came home to find several people in my backyard. They were measuring the space and discussing where to put things. I rushed outside and asked what they were doing. One man said he was with a wedding rental company, and they were finalizing setup plans. I asked who gave them permission, and he said, Karen. I told them to leave immediately, that Karen didn't have permission to use my property. The man apologized and left. I then went straight to Karen's house and knocked on her door. She opened it with a fake smile. I asked what she thought she was doing. She said she assumed I'd come around. I told her firmly that I had not and would not give permission. She argued that she'd already paid for rentals and guests were invited. I said, that's not my problem, and walked away. Later that week, a truck arrived with tables, chairs, and a large event tent. The delivery driver asked where I wanted the setup. I asked to see the order form, and sure enough, it listed my address. I refused delivery. The driver was confused, and I explained someone was trying to use my property without permission. He understood and drove off. I tried calling Karen. No answer. I left her a message saying if she didn't stop, I'd take legal action. I also contacted the HOA and explained the situation. They were hesitant to intervene, but noted my concerns. That night, Karen showed up furious. She screamed that I had ruined her daughter's special day and made everything harder. I calmly told her that I never agreed to anything and to stop trying to use my property. I warned her that if she stepped onto my land again, I'd call the police. A few days passed. I thought maybe she had finally gotten the message. But one afternoon, I returned home to find people in my yard again. This time, they were assembling a giant tent. I rushed out and told them to leave. One of the men called Karen. She arrived minutes later and began yelling, saying I was being unreasonable and selfish. I pulled out my phone and began recording the interaction. I told her clearly, again, that she had no right to use my yard, and this was trespassing. She screamed that I was ruining her daughter's wedding. I said I'd call the police. She called me names and stomped off, yelling that I'd regret this. That night, I called my cousin, who happens to be part of a biker club. They're loud, friendly, and know how to have a good time. I told him the situation and asked if he and his buddies wanted to come over for a cookout. They were more than happy to. On the day of the wedding, I set up my yard for a huge BBQ. The bikers arrived early, bringing grills, coolers, music speakers, and folding chairs. They wore their vests, played rock music, and laughed loudly. The smell of meat cooking filled the air. Karen's guests began arriving. The contrast was hilarious. On one side, a loud, lively BBQ with dozens of leather-wearing bikers having a blast. On the other, Karen trying to host a prim and proper wedding in her cramped backyard. It was obvious she hadn't planned to use her own space until the last second. Karen came to my yard, red-faced and furious. She screamed over the music, demanding I stop the party. I smiled and said, I'm having a private event on my own property, just like you wanted to." She yelled that I was being vindictive and ruining her daughter's big day. I shrugged and said, "Maybe next time don't try to steal someone's yard." She called the police. Officers arrived and spoke to both of us. I showed them the videos, text messages, and recordings proving she tried to take over my backyard without permission. The officers told her she had no case and warned her to stay off my property. She tried to argue, but they shut her down. The rest of the day was priceless. Karen's wedding was a disaster. Guests were confused, crammed together, and overwhelmed by the noise from our side. Her daughter looked miserable. The tent barely fit. People were tripping over each other. Meanwhile, we were laughing, eating, and having a blast. The bikers were perfect gentlemen, rowdy but respectful of my property. After the wedding fiasco, Karen tried to report me to the HOA for disturbing the peace. I met with them, showed all my evidence, and they ruled in my favor. In fact, they fined Karen for unauthorized planning, trespassing, and abuse of HOA authority. Her reputation in the neighborhood was in tatters. Word got around quickly. She tried to start a petition to have me removed from the neighborhood, claiming I was dangerous and aggressive. No one signed. Instead, a few neighbors came by to shake my hand and say I had handled it well. Some even joked they wanted to come to my next BBQ. Eventually, Karen put her house on the market. A for sale sign went up just a couple of months later. She and her daughter moved away quietly. No goodbye, no final confrontation. Just silence. Now I still live here peacefully. The HOA is quieter, the neighbors are friendlier, and my backyard remains just that. Mine. Sometimes I still host a BBQ, and every once in a while, I'll invite the biker crew back just for the fun of it. If you like this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and share it with family and friends. Thank you.